I think one of the things we should be preparing women for labour is that they will come to a point halfway through where labour is not external anymore. It becomes internal, and that's how it's meant to be. That's how it's meant to happen. And if we keep the external stimulus in the second part of labour towards the birth approaching, we're actually overriding what should happen. And that's a massive thing.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Tracy Donegan. Today I'm speaking with Cass McNamara. Cass is a midwife and the inventor of the CUB, an ingenious inflatable birth stool. Cass created this innovative product for labour after recognising the limitations of existing products used in maternity care that was supposed to support instinctive, mother-led, upright labour and birth positions. As a registered midwife with the National Health Service in the UK, Cass found that traditional options such as gym balls, obstetric beds and rigid birth stools lacked versatility and comfort for women. So in this episode, we discuss her journey from midwife to entrepreneur and why the CUB is making birth better around the world. And now I bring you Cass McNamara.
Hi, everybody. You're very welcome to the next episode of the Tracy Donegan podcast. And today I'm delighted to welcome Cass McNamara, midwife, entrepreneur, and master of so many, so much. Cass and I have known each other for a couple of years, and I wanted to have Cass on today to talk about her work with the CUB, this brilliant inflatable birth stool that I take to all of my births, and my clients absolutely love it. It's a great option to use alongside a birth ball or in place of a birth ball, because I find some of the moms love the stability of the CUB when they're in labour. So, Cass, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Tracy. Hi. It's lovely to be here. I'm very, very happy to talk to you, and as always, and I'm very happy to talk about the CUB.
Tell us a little bit about your background, Cass, and where you are in the world today.
Well, I am a midwife. I've been a midwife for almost 30 years. I originally trained down in England and then moved back up to Scotland. So right now, I'm in southwest Scotland where I live. With my husband and little dogs. I've got 3 grown-up sons who are all left home and independent, which is fabulous. Yeah, that's just so good when they eventually get to that point. And I work in my business, Birth Sparks, where we market and sell the CUB, and we sell it all over the world. That's my main job. I have some other hats, but that's my main job.
Great, and we will, Cass will be back to chat to us later on this year to talk about the Mama Conference, which is an incredible conference for midwives and student midwives. If you can get your backsides to Scotland next year for the Mama Conference, you will not regret it. Cass, tell me a little bit, you were working as a midwife, and so what inspired you to start your own business and to design the CUB?
It really came from... Very originally, it was concern about phthalates and PCBs in plastics. And when I had first qualified, in fact, before I actually qualified as a midwife, my elder 2 sons were infants at the time too. And I was using cloth nappies, and the only reason I was using them was because I'd read an article about, at the time, how many phthalates and PCBs were used in disposable nappies and how easy it is, 20 minutes of exposure to them, especially in damp, warm environments, which of course nappies are. You absorb toxic levels of these plasticizers. And it was affecting fertility and all sorts of things. So I had quite an interest really in avoiding toxic kind of chemicals wherever possible. And then I started looking around me and thinking, what else are we exposing ourselves to? And I actually discovered that gym balls in hospitals are one of the major sources of exposure to pregnant women and the fetus in utero of phthalates and PCBs, which has been found in the placenta, in breast milk, in the baby's blood at toxic levels. And I thought to myself, why are we even using these? These were never designed for extended periods of contact with the skin. They were designed as gym balls to be used by people with clothes on for 10 minutes as part of an exercise sequence. They weren't designed for people's bare legs or bums or bodies or hands to be in contact with for hours on end. And I also started thinking, and actually, why are they called birth balls? Nobody can give birth sitting on a ball. It doesn't work. You're sitting on the exit, And then I started thinking, well, the birth stools, what are the problems with them? And it kind of all just came together. It started out as an interest about being exposed to toxic chemicals that then grew into, well, if that's the problem, how can we fix it, but how can we make it better? And I started looking at, well, the things we have in birth centres and labour wards to keep women upright and mobile are these toxic balls. Why do we not have something that's not? And I thought, well, we have birth stools. But then when you look at all the research in birth stools, you realise traditional ones have a major design flaw. And that is actually that they're made of rigid substances, so they're wood, metal or plastic. And when people sit for more than about 30 minutes on a rigid product like that, it's been shown that it inhibits venous returns, and that's on the legs because of the hard edges at the back of the thighs and on the inner thighs. And so they end up with really congested perineums. So I'm sure lots of people have seen somebody that's had been on a birth stool for a while. Their perineum becomes very congested. And of course, then they have increased blood loss, not because upright birth causes increased blood loss, but because perineal trauma from a congested perineum causes more blood loss. So I thought, right, there must be a shaped thing that's not poisonous. There must be something better. And I looked at cushions again. They can be rigid, the coverings need replaced, they're not disposable, phenomenally expensive as well. So I really began with a process of using my sons, as they were young at the time, Action Man, and modelling clay, thinking, what's the good bits about birth stools and the good bits about balls that I want to keep, but what are the bad bits we need to get rid of? So it just became obvious that making something that firstly was non-toxic was the main thing to me, a really important thing. And secondly, something that was versatile, could be used in different ways, could be adjusted, that wouldn't cause congestion, that people could use for hours if they needed to, but they could use it in lots of different ways. Because although you see some very nice marketing images of the rigid birth stools of people in weird positions, we all know nobody's using them that length. Nobody is leaning on them, or they're not doing it because they're hard and uncomfortable. They're not designed for people to use in instinctive, intuitive ways. So I came up with, well, an inflatable shaped thing is the way forward. And I ran some focus groups. I asked other midwives, I asked mothers, I asked obstetricians, all sorts of different people, and I started pulling together some ideas. And from that idea, I noticed there was a competition in the Scottish Government to win money to develop a business idea or a product. So I entered the Scottish Edge Fund, and by some weird miracle, with me standing there talking about birth to a panel of men and an audience of about 500 people, and these men looked terrified because I'm sure they thought I might say vagina or periods at them. They all had the kind of rabbit in the headlight look. And I did a pitch and they gave me £30,000. and that's what started me off.
Hey there, if you're enjoying this conversation and are passionate about evidence-based care in labour, the best way to support our work is to subscribe and share this episode with other amazing women in your life. Your support is so important to us and helps us reach more mothers with empowering content. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button and spread the love.
Wow. that must have felt phenomenal to win, and yeah, 30 grand, nice.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it was a bit weird because they were initially a little bit kind of not hostile. I think they just there was hundreds of applicants for this competition, and they were whittled down, and then there was 40 people that were picked to give a pitch, and I was one of them. I'd say 90% of the other businesses were all apps or digital things or, something really cool and clever, gin, beer distilleries and stuff. And there I'm standing there talking about women's perineums and not being poisoned by plastic, so it was a bit kind of left centre. So they were a bit kind of hostile. And I tend to be one of these people that when I feel that from people, I have my Scottish genes kick in and I get a bit of a bring it on. Bring it on. Say what you like. And one of the judges actually said to me, so you gave a 10-minute pitch and then you had a 10-minute Q&A on the stage. And one of them actually said, so what is this plastic thing? What are you talking about? What, plastic dolls, women, what? And I went, no, that's another industry that you're probably more familiar with than I am. And he kind of looked at me, and then the other judges started laughing, and that in itself kind of broke the ice a bit,
yeah.
And that made a difference. So the pitch itself, I didn't find difficult. I'm not the kind of person that gets stage fright. I didn't find the pitch difficult. I actually felt at a disadvantage. I was one of only 4 women there. I was the only one talking about women's bodies, women's health, particularly unsexy, slightly taboo subjects in an open forum like that. So yeah, it was fun, and I couldn't believe it. On the drive home, I kept saying to my husband Steve, "Did they really just give me £30,000? Really? Couldn't believe it. I was absolutely blown away."
So you went home and had a celebratory drink, and they all needed a drink after your bid.
You get feedback after it, and the feedback was they weren't quite sure what I was going to do, but they were sure I was going to do something. And I thought, well, I don't care what you think, just give me the cash so that I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. So from Action Men and Play-Doh, what about the development process? So I guess, where did you end up? Where do you manufacture it? Did it take like a million different prototypes, and how was that process?
I actually decided that I had the idea and I knew how it needed to function for users, but I'm not an engineer and I'm not a device designer. These are all technical things, skills that people have. And so I decided that I'd use some of that money and I'd contact a device engineer, because I wanted to make sure that it was actually engineered properly, that it would be safe, it'd have a low tip point, that it would be stable, the chemical composition of it, all of that kind of stuff was really important to me. And it turned out I went through an organisation called Scottish Enterprise, and they said, oh, there's a guy that actually lives not far from you. He's semi-retired, but he invented the machine that does skin grafts, that takes skin off, and he won some international award for that design back in the 80s or something. And he lives on a farm, he's semi-retired, lives on a farm. So I contacted him and met up with him, and he was like your archetypal weird scientist. That's it, but a nicer person you couldn't meet. So we talked through what my vision was, what I needed it to do, and he actually did all the design drawings for it. Things like, if you make something that's inflatable, it wants to be round, most of the time. So the CUB has internal ribs to make sure that it stays flat on the top and bottom aspects. He worked out the tip point so that it was stable. So every single bit of it was designed by a device engineer. Then he did all the technical drawings, and then the game was on to try and find somewhere to manufacture it. And that was torturous, to be honest. I again used Scottish Enterprise to be put in touch with a company in Hong Kong that you pay them some money and they find you registered factories that have got all the right ISO certifications, all of the right quality control certifications in a similar field. So I actually found they put me in touch with a company that make airflow mattresses for hospital beds to prevent pressure sores. So I knew they had all the right certificates, and I knew they supplied all over the world. They were a bona fide factory, and So we did go through 2 or 3 iterations very originally, but we had to try and get the money was run out really quickly because £30,000 sounds a huge amount of money, and it is if you don't have it, but it's not when you're with a device. It really isn't. And we went through, got some prototypes. The money was running out. We eventually got to a minimally viable product that was safe enough to put onto the market. I also decided to have it registered as a medical device so that we could legally apply a CE mark, have it registered with the GNDM registration in Europe. And that requires a lot of testing as well. And what you'll find with things like balls and some of these other products that are created, none of them are made in registered factories. That's why they're all cheap. But none of them have CE marks. None of them actually conform to any regulations anywhere. So I had gone to a company to try, you have to register and fill in all this declarations of conformity and testing results, and it had to be bounced on by a machine like 10,000 times in 24 hours, all of that kind of stuff till it blew up. They had to inflate them and see how far it took to explode them, all of that stuff. And then I had to have all of those reports to then get it registered to get a CE mark so it was legally placed onto the market. And I went to a company that said, we'll do all that for you. And they gave me a quote of £17,000. And I thought, I don't have £17,000 for them at that point. I'd spent most of the money even just getting to that point. So I thought, how hard can it be? Famous last words. But actually, it turned out I contacted the MHRA, I downloaded the forms online, and then I phoned up a very, very, very helpful helpline. And the woman talked me through what I had to fill in to each box and each column and what reports I had to include in it. And it cost me £70. It cost me £70 to do it. Because what these companies are charging for is that people don't know how to fill in the forms. But actually, the woman in the helpline spent like hours. I was phoning, can I phone you back? And I'd phone her back and she'd say, what are you stuck on? I could email her. She was unbelievably helpful. So I managed to get a CE mark. I managed to get a minimally viable product to put in the market because we needed as many people as possible to use it to get the feedback to see what we needed to refine. So the very first thing that was refined was the valves. So the first ones that were put on were these little clear things that were useless, really hard to inflate and deflate. So they went, and we changed them to exactly the same valves that are used on birth stools. So quick inflate, deflate valves. So that was one thing. And then the original ones also had handles on them, but what was happening is users were using them and pulling on the handles and tearing it. The thickness of the material also wasn't quite thick enough, so it was a bit more prone to popping. And what we actually saw was even things like writing instruction booklets, and I'll see photos online and you'll see two people sitting on it, or you'll see people doing weird and wonderful things on it, and you think, specifically it says don't do that. So what we learned is we had to mitigate for normal human, oh, I know what to do with this. We've all done it. We don't read all the instruction booklet. And when it seems to be an obvious product, people don't always read very well. So we had to start mitigating for things. We also added an extra layer on the top and the bottom because they're the surfaces that are more likely to get damaged or punctured. It's an ongoing process. I mean, just in the last 2 years ago, somebody said, we keep losing the brochures. It'd be good if we had physicians to use it printed onto the product. And I thought, great idea. Yep, did it. So that's one of the joys of it being your own product, is you can consistently iterate. You can take feedback. So the first product, probably that took about 18 months. And then there was business things like price point testing, making sure the brochures were translated into enough languages to meet regulations in different countries, changing the name if necessary in different countries, because what we didn't want was for CUB to translate as something hideous in another language. And a good example of that was there's a product called Hot Seat, which is like a cloth high chair you can put onto any chair that slips over the back. It was really popular in the UK and in Europe. But Hot Seat in German actually means best seat. So they had come up with that. So I learned early on to mitigate. Don't have the problem and solve it. Just don't have the problem. Mitigate, research everything in advance. So that was the first one, but it's the first iteration. And over the years, there have been numerous ones. Patents as well. What I felt was really important, because it's an obvious thing for people to think, oh, we'll do our own version of that. And I realized quite early on that was quite important. So I have an EU patent, I have a UK patent, I've one in India, one in China, and one in the USA. So I have all of the main markets covered. And the trademark names, we have a couple of different trademark names for the same product in different countries, simply because, again, CUB didn't translate very well in Mandarin Chinese. So in the equivalent in China is mum-ease, which is a different thing. So there's always little things come up that's important when you're responsible for a product.
Yeah. When I had the CUB the other day at a birth, and I think having the positions is just so helpful, because oftentimes, because I'm in the US, so it's mostly, obstetric nurses that I'm working with. So, but the nurses come into the room, they're like, how do we use this? And then when they just see all the different positions, then I think it's great. And they're like, oh, we can do this with it and this with it. And I'm like, yeah. So that I don't have to be demonstrating for every, new nurse that comes in. Yeah. So, but the nurses absolutely seem to love it as well. And the midwives in my area. So what kind of feedback are you getting from, well, first of all, tell me what the benefits are. So I actually didn't know that about the venous return and the issues with the hard surfaces, the hard birth stools, because I had, you see the research, and there was research about, I think, women who are using birth stools or were having more bleeds or more blood loss. I'm like, what? I couldn't understand that, and I do recognize now that the definite swelling of the tissues of the perineum, and absolutely now I'm thinking, okay, and it's just so much more comfortable, because if I've sat on a birth stool just to test it out, and like a couple of minutes in, like it hurts. It's not comfortable. But tell me about, what are the benefits? So if we've nurses, midwives, anyone interested in birth, what are the main benefits of using the CUB?
Well, obviously the idea behind it is to promote movement, instinctive movement. Although there's positions that we recommend, actually the product is designed to fit around the user. fit around the woman and her body and how she feels. It's not about being prescriptive, because if we're going to be prescriptive that you should only use X, Y, or Z position, they may as well just be in a bed, because all you're doing is creating the same situation. So the idea behind it is that it promotes instinctive movement, and instinctively, most women will move in more upright positions in labour. And physiologically, we are not actually designed very well to give birth on our back, because that decreases the amount of available space for the baby to negotiate through your pelvis. So physiologically and anatomically, we are designed best to give birth on our knees, slightly leaning forward. So that's why a lot of women will, if they're moving about, they will instinctively turn to their knees. They will get closer to the ground. Even if they're standing, they will bend their knees closer to the ground, because this is an instinctive movement. So the benefits of all of these positions are, firstly, you are maximising the amount of available space for the baby to negotiate its way, do all its cardinal movements to get through the pelvis, both the inlet and the outlet. It also promotes more effective contractions. And despite the fact a lot of people seem to think that babies become stuck in labour because of the position they're in, it's actually more the case that babies become stuck in labour because there is not enough force from contractions to push them through the path of least resistance. So not strong enough contractions and less space in your pelvis, both of those things together is going to make it much harder for that baby to move as it should do. If the baby's not moving down through your pelvis as it should do, the inside of the cervix is not getting the right stimulus, which is then the feedback to the strength of contractions, which will help open the cervix. So you've got then a whole cascade of things falling off simply because the woman is not able to maximize her own body's action. So more effective contractions, and these are all research-based, show that babies must follow the path of least resistance through the pelvis. That's why they turn, is because they're following that path. So being upright, more effective contractions helps the baby move through, which means it's less likely to become stuck, and then it will be less likely to have fetal distress. So research has shown that the risk of an emergency section when women move instinctively and are more upright is reduced by about 29%. Just by moving instinctively and being upright. Fetal heart rate abnormalities are reduced by 54% in women that move instinctively and move about. Instrumental births are reduced by 21%. These are all incredibly significant benefits. So we have known for years the benefits of upright positions and movement. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the woman has to stay upright all the time. What she needs to do is do what she feels like doing. That's what she needs to do. If she feels like lying down, that's what she should do. If she feels like standing up or hopping on one leg, that's what she should do. So it's not about being prescriptive. It's not about forcing mothers not to rest if that's what they feel they need to do. And actually, I'm a great believer that when people are encouraged to follow the lead of their own sensations, the lead of their own body, they will automatically do what their body needs them to do to mitigate the situation they're in. So, I mean, even for myself, my youngest son was a home birth, and he was also a very big baby. And I had, despite having had two babies before, with no problems at all, I had a very long, really, really arduous, it felt, labour with a 4-hour second stage. And I had been up and down stairs, I had been in every position, and I was literally just, I don't think I can do this. I just can't do it. And then suddenly I just thought I need to lie on the floor. And I said to my husband and said to the two midwives that were there, just don't leave me. Let me lie on the floor. And I lay flat on my back on the floor. And somebody tried to put a pillow behind my head. And I went, no, don't touch me. And the minute I lay flat on the floor with my head back, he started being born. So actually, he was born about 10 minutes later, a big 10-pound-7 baby. You know, I know you've had a big baby as well. You know, we're the big baby club here. And he came out, and afterwards I was talking to the midwife, who was a colleague that I actually worked with, and I said, I've been trying to figure out what's going on. And when he was born, he'd obviously been asynclitic because he had quite a bit of caput across his parietal bone. And I think for whatever reason, because he was this big, massive baby, and he wasn't a fat baby, he was just really huge. And he's a big, huge person now, you know, it's just his build. And I think with me moving about, there was something that needed to push him, nudge him a bit. And when I was up and moving, there was all this free space, but there was nothing nudging him somehow. And I think when I lay flat on my back on the floor, my sacrum perhaps pushed his head a bit, pushed up against his head and just unwedged him or something, because it was really obvious. And the whole time, my whole labour, I had been upright, I'd been moving, not for any ideological thing, just because that's what I felt it did. And it was really suddenly I thought, I've got to lie down. And as soon as I felt that, strangely enough, I have seen somebody else, just one other woman, I was at a home birth, and again, her baby was quite a big baby, and she did the same. She just suddenly knelt on the floor, got on her elbow, and lay flat on her back. And within a couple of minutes, that baby was pushed out. So there's something there in those situations. Quite what it is, I don't know, but who cares as long as it works.
That's it. And what's interesting is when you think of, like, if you had said to me, oh, you know, we had a 10-pound-7 baby giving birth flat in the back, I'd be like, who put her on the back? Who put her on her back? Because it's very different to being told you need to lie on your back to following, oh, like, actually, this might feel really good for a minute, and just like stand on your head if it feels good, and it's, you know, and that's helpful, and
And how many women have you seen adopt all sorts of kind of unusual situations? And something I noticed as well when I was doing some research for the CUB, I watched lots of YouTube videos of people having free births or home births, really just so that I could see people moving instinctively. And I must have watched hundreds of them. And one of the things that I noticed really clearly was when somebody is on all fours and they're pushing for a while, you quite often see them lift one leg, so they're asymmetrical, and put that foot flat on the floor. And the baby always comes out facing that leg. It's a really odd thing. So I kind of come to the conclusion, I kept seeing it and thinking, why is that when they do that? What is going on there? I'm thinking, maybe that's just where that opposite shoulder, that shoulder above there is just a bit of a, not quite narrow enough, or just not quite tucked in enough, or there's something going on there. And they always rotate. When they come out, they always rotate to that leg. Now, there must be something in that. And I feel actually, even though I'd been a midwife for quite a number of years, I actually felt I learned a lot from watching a lot of these videos. Just watch it with the sound off so that I wasn't distracted. I just watched them to see what people were doing. And I noticed things like the closer somebody's knees get to the floor when they're walking about, the closer it is to the baby being born. And that whole starting up, you know, one leg, shaking one leg, rubbing one hip. You know, I actually think that left to their own devices, when you watch people in labour and give birth, they actually do all the things they need to do. They just do it. And so having the CUB, I felt, was not about making people use particular positions, it was about giving them a tool they could use if it was helpful to them at that time. So things like, if you like kneeling or being on all fours, your knees get sore, but your arms and wrists get sore as well. You can't maintain it. So it had to have a big back so that there's space to actually rest on. And it's quite easy to pop a pillow or a cushion under somebody's knees if their knees are getting sore. If they were going to be asymmetrical, so that one knee up and the foot flat on the floor, I wanted them to be able to still lean on it so that their upper body was supported, so that they weren't trying to do everything all at once. I tried to think through all of the scenarios, how people give birth, the common way of people on their knees giving birth, slightly leaning forward as well. How could we do that? How could we facilitate that? And then I started thinking, how can we actually facilitate for women that don't have the optimal circumstances in terms of, for some reason, they've ended up being induced and they need, or they've chosen to have an epidural. And so you've taken away all of that instinctive feedback. So then is the time that you probably have to start using more rational ideas about helping people use different positions. So I wanted it to be able to be used in lots of different circumstances. So as well as a safety feature, the 2 separate inflation chambers, that was about being able to use it in a single inflation on a hospital bed, so that if you had an epidural, you could still have that kind of birth stool without the hard edges support on a bed, because not all of the hospital beds around the world have the fancy that will turn into all sorts of different things. They just don't. So I wanted it to be an easy way that they could still use it. But that in itself took a bit of testing. So what I did is I went into 3 or 4 different hospitals and asked a couple of obstetricians, some anaesthetists, some midwives, and I said to them, what would be your issue? You've got somebody who has an epidural and they're sitting on this in a single inflation, and they've got an IV, and they've got continuous monitoring on, and with the wires, the old-fashioned wires. Tell me what your concerns are with this. And we actually just worked through lots of different scenarios. And one of the things that came up, they said, well, what if the baby's head came out and there was the shoulders were stuck and you wanted to do McRoberts, get them quickly onto the back. And so actually what we came up with, well, the quick release valves deflate that single inflation in like 2 seconds, and you don't need to move it out from under the bum. Just leave it as flat. You don't need to be pulling it about or doing anything. So let the air out. The weight of the woman's body will deflate that pretty instantly. Put the back of the bed back. Don't worry about that. That's not your issue at that moment in time. So there was a lot of things that were considered in a really practical way, which I think is important. But the more important thing is that people can use the CUB in a way that works for them regardless of what's going on. Really, the only people it's not any use for is people having sections. There's nothing we can do there with a CUB. You know, if there was, believe me, I would have thought of it.
Actually, one of the ways I love to use it is by change, depending on how tall mom is, we fix the height of the bed and we have the CUB on the top of the bed so she can be, and we cover it and she can kind of put a pillow on it so she can be still in a nice upright position. So let's say during a surge, during a contraction, she can lean over. So she's standing, she's moving her hips and she's leaning over the CUB on the bed. And then we can be doing double hip squeeze, whatever behind. And then usually I'll have dad either sitting behind with, usually sometimes there's a ball. So when that surge ends, she can sit down on the or on the ball and then lean back into her partner's arms and then just rest, and then we help her up for the next one. But it's a really nice way to labor and rest, as well, and just moving those hips, and the moms love that, being able to stand and kind of lean over it comfortably.
And realistically, it has to be something that's not going to cause an issue to the people that might be providing your care as well. So like I said, with the using it with people with an epidural and a single inflation, I wanted to know, again, that this is about mitigating the problem before it's a problem. What I didn't want to happen was people come back and say, oh, well, we had somebody at the shoulder dystocia. We couldn't get them off because we were pulling it out from under them and it took time. You know, it's actually better to think through it, be logical about it. And even when people are moving instinctively and giving birth, it also has to be something that is not going to cause an issue to you as well. You know, because some things do. I mean, I'm sure we've all at some point looked after somebody that's had a ball and that ball shot out behind their backside, or they've flipped off it, or you trip over it, or it's not stable, or it's wet, or, you know, some such nonsense like that. So I felt it was important that in part of the development of it, I still feel it's important. I constantly try to get people to say, what could I do better? What could I change? You know, because that's how you know it will benefit more people. I can think whatever I like about how it benefits people, but that matters not one bit to some woman in labour somewhere in the world if it doesn't work for her. So getting as much feedback from as many people as possible is quite a big thing to me. I love it, absolutely love it. You know, I love people's ideas.
And I love using it in the shower as well, because oftentimes this awful shower chair that is sitting there, and I'm like, oh no, this is just gonna, it's so sore, and I'm like, no, and put the CUB in, and mom can be sitting in the shower, and it's really nice. Again, a space that she can be resting in and getting the nice hot water at the same time.
A lot of people will say, oh, you know, people can just go and sit backwards on the loo. Yep, absolutely can, but you've got the same problem as the birth stool, hard edges. You're going to get swollen and congested. It's all right for short periods of time, but really people shouldn't be sitting in that position for more than about 20 minutes. They can get up, move, and go about, do some other stuff and come back later on. But having people sit for extended periods of time with hard edges under the backs of their thighs and their perineum stretched and becoming congested doesn't help. Some people seem to like, or it's similar with that when you look at research around what position causes most perineal trauma, and the position that causes most perineal trauma is actually deep squatting. But you hear people talk about squatting. And I think people like that, and they like the traditional birth stools because it gives the illusion that the baby is advancing. And by that, I mean, you see somebody sitting on quite a low birth stool with hard edges, and you can see the tip of the vertex, and there might be some caput. But actually, if they were in any other position, you probably wouldn't see that. It's because their perineum, their legs are extended, their perineum is stretched more than it would naturally be. That's not a natural position that people adopt. In fact, like I said, because physiologically we're more designed to give birth on our knees leaning forward, that's to protect our perineum. So the baby's head comes down behind the perineum. When somebody's in a squat, the baby's head comes up against the perineum. It doesn't slip down behind it, it comes up against it. So when you see somebody sitting, you start to see that, and then they get all excited, yeah, the baby's moving. That person gets up and moves about. You won't see that. Again, it gives an illusion, and it gives people that the baby's nearly here, but that's a double-edged sword, because when they do inevitably change position or go somewhere else and the baby's not born in the next contraction, people start getting angsty and they start thinking, it's stuck, it's not advancing, and where it never was to begin with. So when you look at research on most perineal trauma, deep squatting, and some of these birth stools are very low and really do put people in a very deep squat. You'll notice the cup isn't actually that low, but some of them with the hard edges are actually quite low. So squatting, the next one is lithotomy. So all of these 70% of women that end up with legs in being held up by stirrups. I hate that word stirrups, but not everybody knows what lithotomy, the word, is really explaining. Lithotomy second, and then after that, you find the least likely to have any perineal trauma is standing or kneeling, and followed by all fours. So if you want to avoid perineal trauma, get up. That's the first thing you need to do. Don't get into a deep squat for the birth. Don't get me wrong again, but there's no absolutes. Where none of us are clones. So if you did happen to be using like a sling, and I actually think they're really good. If you did happen to be using a sling and the baby decides to be born, hey, great, that's what was meant to happen. But if you think using a birth stool will make the birth happen quicker because it's taken longer than everybody thinks it should or imagines it should or would like it to, then that's when you run into problems. It's again about forcing the situation that is not naturally adopted or instinctively adopted.
Can I just go back, because a really big issue here in the US is that, and I know there'll be lots of doulas watching will really enjoy this video, but I think the point that, as when I work as a doula and I'm going into the units, a lot of the time, there's this focus on, the bathroom, because the bathroom is this like smaller, dark space where we're not going to have everyone running in and out, so there is kind of a little bit of respect for that space, and so we can kind of dim the lights and everything. But sitting backwards on the toilet, you don't have a cistern or anything you can even be leaning on. It's horribly uncomfortable. But I recognize that doulas watching this, they're going to think, oh, but we love getting mom on the toilet, because there is this idea, I think we call it the dilation station, get her in the toilet. Part of it is to get her out of the big room and all the lights and all the people, to get her into a more private space. But I really recognize now that I'm trying to figure out now I'm just going to have to bring the cub into the bathroom, and just so doesn't have to get on the toilet at all. And just because it's just not comfortable. There's things I'm going to play around with that the next birth.
I suppose it's a trade-off, because I actually think that one of the biggest barriers to labour slowing down and not progressing and people deciding it's now time to birth their baby is being watched. I think that's a huge thing. Actually, my own belief is that's why water births work so well, is people's perineums aren't visible most of the time. I actually think it's an instinctive thing. When you probably look at an instinctive brain, there's probably part of our brain that says, not safe, there's other animals here. This is vulnerable, they could kill the baby. There must be some instinctive thing. I also think going into a toilet, from toddlers, we're trained to relax our pelvic floor when we sit on the toilet. But again, that's because it's private. This is where you relax your pelvic floor. So if somebody does that just because they're sitting on a toilet, I actually think probably it's not an issue about how well or how she should or shouldn't dilate. The issue is what's stopping her from dilating in the comfortable room she was in. What's going on in there? Who's in there? What are they doing? Are they staring at her? What's going on? Does she feel she's not safe? Is it not private? A lot of people as well don't know anything about, psychovegetative regulation as it is as well. So we know that stimulating the cortex, so light hitting the back of the eye, stops and slows contractions, talking, asking questions, stops contractions, feeling cold, feeling unsafe, feeling you don't have privacy. All of these things will slow contractions. So the old stories of, I was contracting really well at home and the contractions were coming every 5 minutes and we're really strong, and we went to the hospital, and as soon as we got in there, they all just stopped. And then they had to give me Pitocin, or Syntocinon as we call it here. They had to put the drip up because my contractions just stopped. Actually, what happened there was exactly what should happen. psychovegetative regulation, the nervous system kicked in and said, this is a strange environment. You're not sure you're safe here. It's not safe to give birth. Stop. Now, you see it with all sorts of other animals. You see it with horses and sheep and cats and dogs, lots of other mammals. You disturb them in labour, their labour will stop. What you need to do, rather than put the drip up, is say, let's get you nice and comfortable, let's put the lights out, and I'm going to leave you alone for the next hour or half an hour. I'll pop my head in the door and we'll see how you are. The slightest thing, and if you have to sit in a corner in the dark until her nervous system calms down and said, okay, we're safe, we can labour now, it's safe to give birth. So promoting an environment where you mitigate against those things is crucial in all birth rooms. So no bright lights, not lots of questions, doors opening and closing, random people, an audience. It's not a spectator sport, giving birth, regardless of how much anybody else wants to be there. So I think going into the bathroom is just an indication. If things do better in the bathroom, it's because there's a problem in the main room. And if you address that problem, you probably won't have to hide away in there. And my experience, even all the years that I spent at home births with women, if they went into the bathroom, it was usually because there was something else going on. There's usually something, and it's a really common thing. Or somebody wanders off on their own and they want some time on their own. And I think one of the things we should be preparing women for labour is that they will come to a point halfway through where labour is not external anymore. It becomes internal, and that's how it's meant to be. That's how it's meant to happen. And if we keep the external stimulus in the second part of labour towards the birth approaching, we're actually overriding what should happen. And that's a massive thing. We know women that are disturbed during labour, their labours are longer as well. We know that during the day, women that give birth in labour during the day have longer labours than they do at night. We know all of these things. We just seem to have lost sight of how to apply them on the scale of the number of people that give birth in hospital. And also, sometimes it's not seen as important.
Yeah, and I think for when I have my doula hat on, part of the ushering mom into the bathroom is because there's just we have to recognize that we're in a system that is going to have people potentially walking in and out that mom doesn't know. Mom's in a state of undress, maybe. It just feels like the bathroom is kind of a little area that we can kind of control, because there's very little we can control out in the big room, telling people not to come into the room. That's a whole other issue. Like it's more about, because I do it as well. I'm like, let's get into the bathroom, because there's just so much activity and people just sticking their head in and checking a machine. And so for me, it's about, because I know I'm trying to protect that oxytocin. I know how sensitive it is to all of these distractions. So it's like, get her into the bathroom. But it is, I really, if we could fix what's going on out there, and
it's a massive challenge. It is a massive challenge, and again thinking about what kind of birth environment are we encouraging or creating, and I also think, even with the best intentions, that sometimes people can get into the mode of their role. So the doctor comes in and he wants to fix because he's trained to fix. That's his training. The nurse or the midwife comes in and they want to monitor, and they hope that everything will go well, but they want to monitor because that's part of their training. The doula comes in and they want to do a bit of fixing as well because they want to help. So they also get into their role. The partner thinks, I've got to rub her back, I've got to do this. And so they start fixing and helping. And the person at the center of it all is now completely overwhelmed because you've now got 4 or 5 people all doing. They're all in their space and they're all doing and they've all got their helping hat on. But actually, sometimes we need to take a step back and think, what are we doing to this woman's nervous system? How are our actions influencing that? I always remember a birth I was at years ago. It was a home birth, and early labour was quite slow and difficult, and there was a lot of heightened emotion and a lot of stuff going on there. And at one point, this woman had said to me, I can't do it. I'm going to the hospital. I want an epidural. And I said, we can absolutely do that if that's what you want to do. But I'll tell you right now, in early labour, before things are established, they won't give you an epidural. We can go there, but you will be left there on your own because it's 2:00 in the morning. I'll be sent home and so will your partner. That's the reality of it. You won't be admitted to labour ward. But if you want to do that, we can do that. If you want to go and wait, if you want some kind of analgesia because you can't manage at home, that's what we will do. And she had an absolute meltdown, understandably, because it was just really hard for her for lots of reasons. And she stormed off. She had some choice language for me and her partner, even the dog. Stormed into her room, slammed the door really loudly, was in there crying, really going for it. And I said to her partner, just leave her for a while. Just leave her. She needs to let go of this stress. And of course, crying is a really beneficial thing because crying is the way that we dump all our cortisol. So tears are full of cortisol, and that's a quick dump. And actually, of course, that's why we're all sleepy after a cry, because get rid of the cortisol, your oxytocin rises, and it makes you feel relaxed and sleepy. So she had her meltdown, and then it went quiet. It went all quiet in there. And after a while, I said to her partner, you can, see if she's all right or whatever, but I'm sure she'll let us know when she's not. And he went, no, stay here. I don't want to upset her. And so him and I actually sat, we played cards with that ear out all the time. And probably about 2.5 years later, I heard some more labour-like noises, but very, very, very deep and quiet and measured and together. It was none of that that you hear earlier on when people are, full of adrenaline. And I thought, right, okay, we'll go in and see her. Honestly, I went in, she was completely zoned out. Never even acknowledged us. I never even said anything. I went in the dark, and I was wearing a head torch, the Hill Walker's head torch on my head, because I needed to see a bit, but I didn't want lights on, so I had my Hill Walker's head torch on. And after a bit, she was just moving around the room and moving into different positions. And after about 40 minutes, I swear that baby came out without even one push. She just breathed that baby out. And it was so perfect, so exactly how, if you had to write a textbook of how humans give birth, it was so perfect. And later on in the day, and I decided we'd keep things really quiet and calm, and we went along the same way. And it was really after the baby was over an hour old before she kind of seemed to come round properly. And she was holding the baby and she went, that was amazing. And that was from early on. But actually what she needed was first to get rid of all the cortisol. Secondly, she needed to deal with whatever was going on with her. An epidural wouldn't have dealt with that. It wouldn't have dealt with it. They kept it going because she couldn't have found the space to do it. So I think an important thing that we do as midwives and doulas is protect that space for people to do what they need to do without us doing it for them. We can be honest with people, but we can't do it for them. and we have to allow them to find a way to do it for them. So if it means that in a great big hospital, somebody goes into the bathroom and they want to stay in there for a while, let them. If they want to pull a sheet over their head and not talk to anybody, let them. Don't interfere with that. Don't be the helper. We don't need to. We're there to support.
I think that comes with experience and really trusting the process as well. Because I know in my early days as a doula, before I even trained as a midwife, it was it was all about the doing. And I remember even like one of my very first births when I was out in Singapore, and kind of walking into the room, and I was like going through this checklist in my head. Should I rub her feet? Should I touch her? Should I do this? And instead of just coming in, let's just sit for a minute. What's going on in the room? So like at a birth I was at recently, this couple just had it together, and we have that one was sitting now upright on the bed and very comfortable. She's about 5 centimeters and just breathing and just really and snoozing between, which is always lovely to watch. And Dad was sitting in the rocking chair and he was snoring. So, and I'm just kind of off in the corner. I have a book with me and she's just coping beautifully. And so like years ago, I would have been, what can I do next? What can I do? She has to get moving. But it's really lovely when you get to that point where I'm just here to support what she's doing. And if you need me to do anything extra, I'm here for it. But what was funny, one of the nurses came in and kind of looked at me and was like, "You doulas get paid too much. I want your job, because I wasn't up in mom's business and doing all the things, So I'm like, oh, we're good. But that time comes, I'm here for it.
It is a real skill to be able to sit back, but you're actually being very careful by taking that step back, because you are hyper aware of, you're relying on sounds, sights, smell, action, responses. You're not relying on machines. You're not relying on subjective measurements of anybody. You're actually relying on your experience and your knowledge. And I always felt when I was working independently, an important part of preparing people for birth was to tell them that I'm hopefully going to be there and I'm hopefully going to be the calm in the storm. I'm not going to be the storm. I'm not the storm. You will deal with it. I'm that center point, and I might not say an awful lot to you. In fact, I probably will limit very much any speaking that I do to you. It will be strictly necessary. And even preparing things for, like, if I feel I need to listen into the baby or I need to do anything, I will touch you on the shoulder before I speak to you so that you know that I'm going to speak to you. It's not a sudden voice in your ear. If I need to do anything at all, I'll touch you on the shoulder first. And I actually think all of that preparation helps people understand that labour is an internal process. It is an internal process. It's not an external process. It happens within your body. It happens within your neural system, within your brain, within your feelings and your emotions and all of those things. It's an internal process. And all of the external is besides the point. My job, I always felt as a midwife, was to promote that internal. And really that's what the CUB is about. It's not about one position or another. It's not about making people do anything. It's about them having just another tool that might be useful for their own internal process, whether that's to be upright and resting or moving or sitting or swaying or whatever. It's about the internal process. And I think if we could encourage people to get back to the idea of labour being an internal process rather than external actions performed by other people, women may develop more confidence again. Because a lot of women are very underconfident and they look to other people, they look to the external, what do I need? Give me the tools, because they don't believe they have them. But actually they do. There's an old saying, my grandmother used to say, you're born knowing everything you'll ever need to know. And I often used to think, what does that mean? I actually think, yeah, you're born and you know how to feed. If you're healthy and you're well, you know how to feed. You know that you need to be kept warm. You're not able to do it, but that's why babies cry. That's why babies smell particular ways, so that they can force their mother to care for them. So we are born knowing all we need to know, especially when it comes to giving birth. When we're born, when we give birth, and when we die, there is no manual for any of those things. These are things that happen to us all. Everyone is either born, everyone will die, and most women will give birth at some point. So these are all universal things. There is no manual for that. But what we do know is none of those things are primarily because of any external forces. They happen within your body.
So, Cass, I love that. I love that focus on it, an internal process, and really all the doing, and it has to stop, really, And I do, I get it, and it took my own process as well of having Cooper at home and having the home birth and trusting that I could do it, and it's now when I'm kind of out in the birth world, it's just a knowing. I know this woman can do it. For me, it's all the I just need to I'm trying to remove the barriers that are going to get in the way of her doing it. Of just like, we're trying to keep that neocortex quiet and let her do her thing. But it is that you're kind of creating this cocoon in the environment for her, because we know all of the lights and the noise and all the rest of that stuff is just going to interrupt and make the process longer. But like, I'm like, yeah, if it feels good to stand on your head, go for it. That's what your body and baby are telling you they need right now.
Yeah.
So just back to the CUB for folks in the US, they'll be able to get the CUB on tracydonegan.org. Where can people get the CUB if they're outside of the US? Where can they get it in the rest of the world?
They can get it in the EU, and that's from a company called midwifesupplies.eu or Pinpoint Parents, and they cover all of the EU. There is the Birth International in Australia as well. We cover the UK direct from us here because we're here. Obviously, it's nice and easy. Again, if we tend to, from our base in the UK, we tend to do a lot of hospital orders rather than individual orders of individual women buying them, or doulas or practices or things. But it tends to be more hospital orders that we deal with.
So within the NHS, so you would have like a cohort of hospitals that they have the CUB, and that's just part of their standard equipment.
The Health Education Scotland bought CUBs for every maternity unit in Scotland. And there's a lot of units in the UK, but to be perfectly honest, the biggest buyers of the CUB are actually in the USA. There's a lot in Australia and Europe, but concentrated, and we've sold CUBs to every hospital in every state in the USA. And some of them are part of their group purchasing organizations, or, some of them are every week we get another one on, and we become a supplier. And I think that's a really great thing. I'm always being asked, can somebody go and do a training course for, because we do have like a Better Birth CUB training day as well, and we did that in the UK for a while. We've done some in Europe, but I'm always being asked if we can do that in the USA. But hopefully you'll be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. I've used this product for years, and yeah, it's part of my toolkit that comes with me.
Yeah.
And I do really like. I had my pump died the other day, and I brought the new pump that you have. I really like the new pump. It's actually really good, and so I was able to pop into the bathroom and bang away for for a few minutes.
I mean, I'm
but
very lazy. If we use them for like displays and exhibitions, I've got some like just camping airbed pumps that are really inexpensive, and they plug in or they take some batteries because I'm very lazy.
yeah. Oh no, me too. I would never usually use it, but I always bring the pump. I bring a manual
Yeah.
pump, and I'll have the electric. The electric one was like, "Grr," and then didn't. It just gave up the ghosts. Let's just
Yeah.
say. So you've had so the hospitals here in the US that are using it, the feedback has all been great, and everyone's
Absolutely great.
enjoying the cup.
One of the things that I really love hearing is that I couldn't tell you when we last had any kind of negative feedback. We do occasionally get somebody saying, "Oh, there was a hospital not so long ago who said, oh, we bought 5 cubs and 2 of them have burst." I said, all right, okay. So when did you buy them? And they'd actually bought them 17 months ago and had been using them. And I said, you do realize it's an inflatable, and an inflatable having repeated use in a hospital by numerous people for 17 months is actually pretty good. If I had something that was inflatable that I used every day for 17 months and it took that long to die, I'd be pretty impressed. And when I worked it out, I actually worked out that it cost them something like 17 cents a day to be able to use that. So very, very good. But that's actually pretty rare because through the iterations of the CUB over the years, like thickening the material, the top and extra layers in the top and bottom, we hardly ever have anybody say anything about it. I couldn't tell you the last time anybody said anything negative about it. What seems to happen when people know about it and they get to try it and use it, they love it, and they see that it's quite instinctive and intuitive, and it's a kind of logical. In a way, it's kind of obvious. It's so obvious that it's kind of like, well, why is there not lots of these types of things on the market? Because it is quite an obvious solution. Sometimes the obvious things are the most appropriate solution. So
Yeah.
People genuinely seem to love it, and they use it in all sorts of different places. At home, in hospital, in birth centres. They use it in antenatal classes and gym classes for pregnant women. Physiotherapists, there's a lot of physiotherapists use it. Because we actually had a big project done with a consultant obstetric physiotherapist for women with pelvic girdle pain, because I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to cause them any problems. But actually, it's now written, it was Cork Hospital were the first hospital to write it into their guidelines for care of women with pelvic girdle pain. So they recommend that the CUB is used for women in that specific circumstance. It's
Fantastic.
also the only named product with the American College of Nurse Midwives in their documents on promoting normal birth and active birth. I think it's kind of becoming a bit like, how everybody calls a vacuum a Hoover. But Hoover was actually the brand. Vacuum is the product. So I think a lot of people now the CUB has become that particular product. People don't always recognise that that's actually its brand name as well as the name of the product. So, as more organisations can see the benefit of it, and I've had some really nice feedback. I had a letter from an obstetrician who told me that they were providing care for somebody that had quite a dense epidural, really wanted a VBAC, was having quite a long second stage, and the midwife said, can we please try the CUB just for a little while? Let's just try one more thing. She's so desperate to have a VBAC. And this obstetrician said, that they managed to move her about, get her in a single inflation in the CUB and have the back of the bed up and lots of pillows, so she was in a proper kind of birth stool situation, and the baby was born and she had her birth. And this obstetrician, I thought, it was really great in taking the time saying, They were really impressed. They were very doubtful and dubious to begin with, but they were really impressed with the product, and they will be using it again, particularly for people that have a dense epidural and really want to have a vaginal birth. Having things like that, or having photos sent. People send me photos all the time. We have thousands and thousands of them. There's not one of them I don't love. Not one of them. I absolutely love seeing it. It absolutely gives me the biggest thrill seeing somebody. And it might just be it's in the back of their car, or it's somebody in labour, or it's their little kid sitting on it while they're, before they're in labour or something. I absolutely love the photos that people send me.
I was about to say, you've come a long way from Action Men and Play-Doh.
Yeah, no, that acting man, he really got into some positions, I'll tell you. Who knew he was that bendy?
You might have to have his own little Instagram channel.
Acting man on the car.
Yeah. Cass, thank you so much for all sharing just lots and lots of great information today. And I learned plenty myself, and which is one of the reasons why I do this, because it's always an opportunity for me to learn too. So for any aspiring innovators out there, midwives, or kind of thinking about getting into the into business really. So where can people reach out to you if they have questions, or do you have a website where people can follow you? And I'll put all of this information as well in the show notes.
I mean, people can just email me, Cass@BirthSparks. That's just an open email. I'm fine for people to email me. I'm helping another midwife right now who's developing a product, a very different product for use in maternity care. And I've done some project work with some universities in the States and in the UK on developing products, really as a consultancy advice on how they would actually practically work. And some of the things that some people come up with that they think are practical are very, very, very impractical. But they're learning, and that's important. So, yeah. But I'm very happy for people to email me. I think most people, particularly women, I think women are inventive. I think we are innovators, because we kind of have to figure a lot of stuff out all the time from being quite young. And particularly when you have children, it's like a daily figuring out process of trying to make things work. And all of the really important things, there's loads of things, like disposable nappies were invented by a woman in Scotland in the 1920s because she had 6 kids and she was sick of washing. And she actually invented and patented disposable nappies. So I think most women, we are innovators. And if you work in birth, every single birth, you have to innovate, because that woman, that family, that baby are all completely unique. So everyone you walk into is different. And so you have to, from the minute you're there, think, what do I need to do here? So you're innovating as you go along just through your work. So, I think the problem is people don't know what to do with their ideas. They don't know how to develop them. They don't know where to go. They don't know, they think it's too much. If somebody had said to me 20 years ago, you're going to be one of the 0.2% of single female named patent owners in the world, I would have thought, no, because most patents actually are held by men. And most of them, if a woman is named on it, she's usually about 5th down on the list of a team or something. There's very, very few. So I'm all for, get your ideas out there, do stuff with it, innovate. There's always a way around things, always a way.
Yeah. That's great advice, and really just to talk to people about your ideas and test them, and just don't take no for an answer. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I would say to people is sometimes when you initially talk to people about your ideas, people love to, they love to say, oh, that never worked. Oh, no, I don't see that work. And I remember doing that quite early on, and people saying, well, I don't know how that would work. And at first I felt a bit deflated, about it. Then later on, I thought, wait a minute, I have spent a long time thinking about this and figuring it out. They took 2 seconds to tell me that didn't work. Do they really think either they're that smart and I'm that stupid, or is that what they're really saying? And so I think you have to take feedback on how to make your idea work. Don't take rubbish about whether it's worth making. That's a different thing altogether. Don't let people put you off.
Yeah, that's right. It'll put you off before you even get started. I think. So be selective about who you're talking to about your ideas.
Yeah, find people that are going to build you up. Even if it's somebody that says, I'm not sure about that, but have you tried this? That's the difference between help and hindrance. When somebody says, oh no, that never worked, and they know nothing about it, compared to somebody that says, that might cause a problem but how about this? Or could you make that different? That's a different thing altogether, But don't be put off by somebody that doesn't like your idea or, so what? So what? So what? Not everybody likes everything. They don't need to.
That's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cass, thank you again. It was wonderful.
You're very welcome.
I'll share all the details in the show notes. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. I think this is going to be a fabulous episode for midwives, doulas, and I hope some parents out there that will enjoy it as well. So again, enjoy the rest of your evening in Scotland.
Yeah, it's a beautiful evening, and I best go and cook food for some people now. It was lovely to talk to you. Thanks for that, Tracy, and we will talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, CUB.
All right, take care then.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Remember, empowerment begins with knowledge. If you enjoyed our time together and want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. So stay inspired, stay informed, and until next time, take care of yourself.